We round off this week's discussion with something very real that some consider a threat. Project 2025 is something that is on the horizon and is here in front of us, and it could fundamentally change the way public education works. We're going to have Scott tell us about it. Scott?
Project 2025, a conservative policy agenda crafted for the next Republican president, proposes eliminating the federal Department of Education, privatizing student loans, and implementing federal parental rights legislation. Developed by the Heritage Foundation and supported by Trump allies, it seeks to fundamentally restructure K-12 and higher education funding and curriculum. Critics argue it would devastate public education, with Sky Perryman of Democracy Forward calling it a wrecking ball to the system. The plan includes dismantling Title I funding for low-income schools, reducing federal oversight, and privatizing student loans, which could limit educational access and quality. While former President Trump has distanced himself from the plan, Democrats warn it reflects his potential presidency's direction. The plan has faced backlash for its perceived undermining of civil rights protections and diversity efforts in education. This story is from The Hill by Lexi Lonis on July 12th, 2024.
Thank you, Scott. And I'm going to go ahead and give the first question to you since you are an educator.
Sure.
Project 2025 actually proposes the elimination of the Department of Education and a significant reorganization of K through 12 education funding. How might these changes impact the quality and equity of public education in the United States?
Oh boy. Okay. So where should I start? I'll start with the quote where we got that wrecking ball thing that I was just talking about. This is from, like I mentioned, Sky Perryman. He's the president and CEO of Democracy Forward. The quote says, "It is not hyperbole to say that Project 2025 would be a wrecking ball to the public education in this country, and it seeks to radically undermine and undercut the ability of people to get a quality education in this country, and then even goes further and seeks to transform our public education system and our public schools into ideological extremist spaces." And I agree with that. I think that's not hyperbole to say that this is an existential threat to public education as we know it. And I think that the effects that they, or at least the effects that they were talking about in this particular article, I'm sure the Project 2025 document itself is just the gift that keeps on giving, which is horrible thing after horrible thing. This article was particularly focused on the changes to education. And I think there's kind of a two-prong approach here. One is get them while they're young, right? It's going to control the content of K-12 education. This is going to be done using things like school vouchers, which reroutes money from, or which can reroute money from public schools to private schools. And we cover that all the time in the nonprofits, the school voucher issue. And skewed content standards, either dropping important material like different racial issues and so forth can be dropped from the curriculum, and adding things like Bible study. And so we're skewing the content and we're redirecting the funds. Keep bigotry alive and well. So it's going to remove protections for vulnerable, marginalized, and minority students. Bigotry encourages division, and a divided population is easier to control. Okay, and so by removing those protections that we have fought long and hard to get these students, is just going to be pushing us back into the dark ages, right? And then also to defund programs that are intended to increase opportunities for underprivileged students. And so getting them while they're young, that's phase one. Phase two is put them down and keep them down. They're going to be destroying the effectiveness of student loan programs by deregulation and privatization. And so privatization is going to allow them to siphon funds off to these private loan organizations. And then deregulation is basically an invitation for more and more severe predatory types of loans. And what that's going to do is that's going to undercut many portions of the population. Their ability to get an education is going to be severely hampered. And to me, that's the frustrating thing. If knowledge is power, this is basically just a big power grab. They want to control the flow of information, and they want to control our ability to get that kind of information. It moves the focus of education from empowerment to basically mental enslavement. If you remove a person's ability to think on their own and investigate, you remove their power to take their lives in a direction that they want. And it's not, and it's shifting that focus. It's not about enabling personal improvement anymore. It's not about contributing to the betterment of us all anymore. Now it's about perpetuating that division, about sacrificing the many for the betterment of the few. And that's not education at all. That's bastardizing an educational system into a tool for control. And so if there's anything that is sacrilege in my eyes, this is it.
We talked earlier this week about the Ziklag organization that talked about what they want to do as far as like taking over the 7 mountains. And one portion of that was education.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like that Project 2025, especially when we're talking about how we want to consolidate the majority of the powers in the executive branch in order to dictate how all the other federal branches to the states and the municipalities actually function, would definitely be something that is concerning. And even I was even thinking about, to your point, Scott, when you were talking about student loans and like, basically like the restructuring of basically the Department of Education, especially when it came to regulation. I don't know if you all remember, but a lot of for-profit schools got sued. I want to say like I want to say like around the time period where Obama took office. And then we had a former president who will name nameless, who also had a for-profit school that had to settle.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times that these for-profit schools were sued was because their curricula that they said would be able to prepare students for the future for them to be able to get jobs was basically a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And you even had like some for-profit schools who had accreditation, but the accreditation that the accreditation standards, those particular for-profit schools were not keeping up with. Now that we have Project 2025 and, depending on how things go in the fall and how things would be implemented, that could very much so be a threat in the way that some of these schools are structured and what could be an oversight as far as like making sure that curriculum is meeting standard practices, making sure that the schools themselves are teaching robust lessons in order to prepare students for the future, instead of actually, saying like everybody has to study the Bible. I guess like everybody's going to turn to a theocrat right now. And that's going to help us in the future, right? I don't think so, is going to be definitely the problem. But, I'm coming to you, Eli, because you said something very interesting about you agree with something concerning the Project 2025. Could you please expand on that?
It is not as sinister as it sounds. The area, the single point on which I agree with what I've read from Project 2025 is that, let's fundamentally restructure the curriculum of kindergarten up through tertiary education. Let's do that. Let's make that better. Where we don't agree is the people that wrote like this document or who are running the Heritage Foundation or the people that are involved in trying to make these changes are more of the same people that should not be structuring education. Get professional, experienced educators that understand, not just educating, but, other things, and have them create an educational structure that is going to be beneficial. It is in our best interest to have an educated society, unless your goal is like ignorant obedience, which I think a strong argument could be made that is, the goal of some individuals that happen to have a lot of power. But if that weren't the case, if we could have an educated society with an accessible quality education, we're going to start to see things get better. But I don't think that's what they want.
Yeah, I think mostly, and because we covered it so many times, it's not necessarily about making things better. It's more about just consolidating and holding on to power. And I am now coming to you, Jonathan, because I know that I've heard a lot of doublespeak in my life, and I think that you have as well. But what are your concerns when it concerns Project 2025?
I have quite a few. And I have heard a lot of doublespeak in my life, but this is really bad. Destroying the Department of Education means that there's no watchdog over education in the country, and they don't want one. Betsy, never mind, I won't say specific names. Some people in the last administration who were higher up in the education department attempted to destroy it from that position. So now they're literally saying they're going to destroy it. You want to give the states the freedom, quotes, in quotes, to underfund and destroy public education. So what are you saying? What if you only want private schools and only those rich enough to afford them can get a good access to good education? That's one of the things that Jefferson was afraid of, actually, when we established public education. Thomas Jefferson pushed for the education because he was of the opinion that in a democracy, the citizenry must be able to think, address the questions of the day, and understand the people they are voting for and what their positions are. If you keep populations dumbed down and without the benefit of a decent education, and you only educate them to be in a trade so that they can be there, they won't know that they're working for slave wages, and they're not able to pursue careers that would put them in positions of power. They are trying to strip the entire people of the United States of that power, and they're starting it with their 7 mountains. But what they really want to do is make sure that their particular viewpoint is forced down people's throats, and that the people are not taught enough critical thinking and have enough education and knowledge about the world to do anything but what they want to do. And that's the problem that I have with it. Education should be under the control of educators, not people who have ulterior agendas that they are trying to fulfill. Our population needs to be educated, and they need to have the skills in thinking and in analysis to be able to create the society that we all want. They've been dumbing down the education for a while. And they really need to. We are falling behind dramatically in education. We are something like 26th in all the nations. I don't have that specifically, but I think that's the last stat I saw. And then there was another one that said we were 18th. But what are we as the United States doing anywhere but the top 5, if not the number 1 in education? What are we doing to our kids? What are we doing to the next generation? Why aren't we bringing them to the point where they know enough math, science, English, literature, and history to be able to make the next leap in our society to a better and more equitable and more inclusive society? That's what's bothering me about the whole thing.
It says something about being in the richest nation, one of the richest nations in the world, and still being damn near 30 in the world when it comes to education, and how you have to pay basically an exorbitant amount of money in order for you to be able to be properly educated, depending on where you go. And we're already having issues when it comes to standards, how people are educated, especially when we're looking at K through 12. I think of my own city and how, depending on what neighborhood that you're in public schools would be a determining factor on the quality of education that you're going to get, even though that everybody in the city is paying property taxes, and those property taxes are supposed to be going to fund the schools. But there is definitely a difference for, those who happen to be in a higher tax bracket on how their schools look versus other neighborhoods where that is not the case. And it's unfortunate that we have this, the only thing I can really call it is an ideological extremism coming from Project 2025 that could possibly be very detrimental to our already very much so broken educational system. So, Scott, I'm wondering, with this extremism that we're seeing with Project 2025 and the shift that the authors want to do, especially when it comes to specific cultural and political viewpoints, how could these changes actually impact academic freedom and diversity of perspectives in schools and universities?
Well, that's the target. I mean, that's the main target. It's not that it like I said before, it's totally bastardizing the entire purpose of education. By the goal of education is for people to learn about the world and to be able to act and to institute change and to push the direction, the world in the direction that is helpful and positive for all of us. We've heard the phrase, a rising tide raises all ships. That's kind of what we're looking for. But instead, what it's doing is it's turning it to a system of using. We use the phrase "teach to your children how to think, not what to think," right? And so, and that is the humble way to approach things. It's an optimistic way to approach things. It's working under the assumption that maybe your children can reach a little bit further than you did. Maybe they can do a little better than you did. Maybe they can learn things that you didn't know about. And so really what this is doing is it's taking away that attitude of curiosity. It's taking away that attitude of betterment, of empowerment. And it's saying, we were talking about this in the other segments too. It's turning it into a system of obedience and of putting people into this particular box, because this is the box that I was in, and this is the box that my parents were in, and this is the box that their parents were in. And so this is the box that you should be in. If you're outside of this box, you are wrong, you're bad, you're impure, you're evil, you're whatever. And, it's flipping the script there. It's saying that it's not that we want you to learn, it's that we want you to learn these specific things. And if you approach your education that way, then you've eliminated those opportunities for improvement. You've eliminated those opportunities to expand and get better. You're even eliminating opportunities for us to keep up with the rest of the world. It's inexcusable for us to have such a low performance. And I disagree with a little bit what Eli was saying. I don't think that our education system needs to be revamped from the ground up. I think that there's good bones there. I think we have a strong core as to to the way that educators approach education. I think it's, and again, I'm a teacher. This is a biased opinion. And so, take what I say with a grain of salt here, but I think it has a lot to do with the attitude towards education. What people aren't looking into getting education for what I would consider the best reasons. They want to get their job, they want to go punch the clock, and they want to move on with their lives. And rather than looking at education as a way of opening yourself up to many opportunities, to many different avenues of investigation and ways that you can satisfy your curiosity. So I think the changing our educational system in this way, I think we will not have an education system anymore. We will have a dogma system. We'll have
indoctrination.
Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan. An indoctrination system. And I think that it's going to be ultimately to the detriment of us as individuals and as a nation.
Eli, did you want to respond to Scott?
Yeah, I'll say, because you're the one that's an educator, if you and I disagree about the education system, the likelihood is that I'm wrong.
Not necessarily. Like I said, I have a biased opinion too, so.
That's argument from authority. But my point is that is why people like you should be making decisions about the education system, and not people like me who don't have experience in that field. And I think you demonstrated that aptly.
And that's what I assumed that you had meant. I didn't mean to be trashing you. It's just that one little nettle in my shoe there I needed to get out.
I'm glad you said it. Yeah.
Come on, Scott. We all knew that you wanted to trash Eli. You talked
I'm
about it
looking to get a fight going here. I mean, we need to. Something has to go down here.
Well, I mean, I think towards like Eli's point about like revamping the education system, and to your point, Scott, about the reasoning behind people wanting to get educated, is that we have to kind of look at basically how our society is structured, specifically in the United States. that, a big emphasis on, doing better economically is placed on education. But we have an issue where we don't have equitable education from California all the way to New York, from the north to the south and everywhere in between, from Ohio to the coast of Florida. I will not bust that. Right. I know. Right. Yeah. From sea to shining sea. No, we're not going to go there.
I think it was few enough notes that were okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
I'm sure that's public domain. I'm sure that one's okay.
Right. It should be. But, but still, I think that if we take both of your points about making sure that an education system can foster things like curiosity and critical thinking, and also the wantingness to become sharper and better, and then having our society structured in a way that those particular values are valued, would make a huge difference in the way that education works for everyone who happens to be here. Unfortunately, we don't have that system, or at least it does not exist everywhere. And then, because it does not exist everywhere, we have Heritage Foundation and some of the other, Christian nationalists, crystal fascists that have also helped develop this particular plan come in and say, we want to make education even shittier by also using it to, like you said, Scott, get them while they're young, right?
Yep.
So I think that if we go back to this whole thing about awareness and how Project 2025 actually approaches and reflects a broader trend of minimizing federal involvement in favor of a market-based solution. There goes that capitalism thing. However, the risk of such a drastic overhaul, including worsening educational inequities and undermining the foundational principles that public education should be accessible and equitable for all. As this debate unfolds, it's crucial for advocates of secularism and humanist values to emphasize the importance of maintaining robust public education systems that serve all students, regardless of their socioeconomic status, their race, their creed, their color, their sexual orientation, their gender identification, or their status. And if you want to know more about our status or anything else, click to see more nonprofits here.